I used to dread family dinners. The polite smiles, the subtle jabs, the way my parents' eyes would always drift toward my brother, Jason, like he was the sun and I was a shadow they tolerated. But tonight was different. I adjusted the cuff of my silk blouse, its soft fabric cool against my skin as I stared out the window of my Manhattan apartment. The city pulsed below, 1,000 stories unfolding, none of them knowing mine. My reflection in the glass looked calm, composed, almost unrecognizable from the girl who once counted tips just to make rent. Then my phone buzzed. Family dinner. Tomorrow. Be there. Jason's message. No greeting, no question, just expectation, like always. For a moment, I almost laughed. He had no idea. None of them did. To them, I was still the struggling sister, the one who worked 2 jobs, who couldn't keep up, who never measured up. I picked up my glass of Merlot, watching the deep red swirl like a secret I'd kept too long. The world saw my success, the company I built, the partnerships I closed, but my family? They never asked. Maybe they didn't want to know. Still, I typed a simple reply. I'll be there. And as I set my phone down, I caught my own smirk in the window's reflection. Tomorrow night, everything would change. It's strange how memories can still sting, even after success dulls most of the pain. I was 23 the night everything broke between me and my family. Back then, I lived in a cramped studio in Ohio, a sagging couch that doubled as a bed, and a fridge humming louder than my hope. I worked mornings at a diner and nights at a small printing shop. My hands always smelled faintly of coffee and ink, and exhaustion had become a permanent part of me. Jason, meanwhile, was living the easy version of our lives. Fresh out of college, he'd already been handed a job at Dad's firm, a corner office, a company car, and a confidence he didn't earn. Our parents couldn't stop bragging about him. Jason's going places, Mom would say, glancing at me with that careful tone people use when they pity you. That night, after my double shift, I stopped by home for dinner. I remember the smell of Mom's roast, the polished table gleaming under warm light. Jason was already there, laughing, retelling some story about closing a big deal. Dad looked at me over his glasses. You're still working those 2 jobs? He asked, like I'd just confessed to a crime. Yeah, I said quietly. For now. Jason smirked. Maybe if you'd planned better, you wouldn't have to hustle so hard. Something in me snapped. Or maybe if I'd been born your favorite, I wouldn't have to prove myself every damn day. The silence after that was heavier than the words. Mom told me to apologize. Dad said I was being dramatic. And Jason just smiled, that smug, effortless smile that burned itself into my memory. I remember grabbing my purse, my hands trembling, tears pressing at the back of my eyes. I didn't cry, though, not in front of them. On my way out, my grandmother, who'd been sitting quietly at the end of the table, reached for my hand. She slipped her old silver bracelet into my palm. Don't let them make you small, Lily, she whispered. You'll build your own table one day. That bracelet became my armor. That night became my line in the sand. I walked out of that house vowing I'd never beg for a seat at their table again. The first few years on my own were brutal. Independence sounded empowering in theory, but in practice, it was just me versus an endless list of bills. I'd work the diner's morning shift, smile plastered on, coffee pots clinking, then race to the print shop, where the hum of machines filled the silence of my exhaustion. But there was something else beneath the fatigue, a stubborn spark. Every time I looked at Grandma's bracelet around my wrist, I reminded myself, you'll build your own table one day. It started with a sketch, literally. I'd always had an eye for design, for color and symmetry. During my breaks, I began doodling logos and layouts on napkins. One day, my manager at the print shop caught me. Instead of scolding, he asked, "You ever think of doing this for real?" That question changed everything. He introduced me to a woman named Margaret Hale, a freelance brand consultant who'd built her career from scratch after a messy divorce. She became my mentor, sharp, fearless, and unflinchingly honest. "Talent is nothing without grit, Lily," she told me once, sipping her black coffee in that no-nonsense way she had. "And you've got plenty of grit." Under her guidance, I started taking online design courses. I'd come home at midnight, feet aching, and dive into typography tutorials until sunrise. The first time someone paid me $100 for a logo, I cried, not because of the money, but because someone believed in me. From there, it snowballed. I built a small portfolio, then a small list of clients, local bakeries, small-town salons, even a tiny real estate firm that wanted to look more professional. My little freelance hustle turned into something bigger than I'd imagined. 2 years later, I quit my second job. By year 3, I registered my own design agency, Silverline Creative, named after the bracelet that had kept me going. But I didn't post about it. Not on Facebook, not in family group chats. I kept my updates vague. Work's going well, or keeping busy.
It was easier that way.
They never cared about the grind. They didn't deserve to share the victory. I poured everything into that company. I hired 2 part-time designers, then 5. We landed a national skincare brand as a client, the kind of deal that shifted everything. Suddenly, my nights weren't filled with coffee and worry. They were filled with strategy calls, design briefs, and quiet pride. And yet, I stayed invisible to them. They still thought of me as the one who works too hard. Maybe I preferred it that way. There was a strange peace in their ignorance. Until that dinner invitation came. When I saw Jason's message light up my screen, I knew instinctively, this wasn't just dinner. It was my moment, not to prove them wrong, but to show myself how far I'd come. The restaurant Jason chose was exactly what I expected. Upscale, dramatic, and just a little too proud of itself. Crystal chandeliers glimmered overhead, and the faint scent of truffle butter lingered in the air. It was the kind of place my family loved, polished enough to make them feel important. I arrived early as always. Old habits. My heels clicked softly across the marble floor as the hostess led me to a private table. I ran a fingertip along the edge of my wine glass, catching the flicker of candlelight on Grandma's bracelet. I smiled. She would have loved this moment. Jason strolled in 10 minutes late, wearing a suit that screamed, executive privilege. Behind him came my parents, my mother in pearls, my father in that same gray blazer he wore to every important family event. Lily, Mom greeted with that careful tone, warm but distant, as though affection were something rationed. You look nice. Jason smirked. Surprised you could make it. Busy waitressing these days. I met his eyes and let a soft laugh escape. Something like that. We ordered. They talked. Or rather, Jason talked. About his new project at Dad's firm, the promotion he almost got, the car he just leased. I nodded politely, sipping my wine, letting them fill the silence with their same old rhythm. Then, halfway through dessert, Jason leaned back with that familiar smirk. So, Lil, what are you up to these days? Still juggling jobs? Dad chuckled softly, and Mom gave me that pitying half-smile I'd grown up with. I set down my fork. Actually, I said evenly, I've been focusing on one thing lately. Jason raised an eyebrow. Oh, finally found a steady gig. Something like that, I said again. I reached into my clutch, pulled out a small card, and slid it across the table. Silverline Creative. Ever heard of it? He glanced at it confused. Dad frowned. Mom tilted her head. Jason snorted. Can't say I have. What's that? Some online hobby. I smiled. Not exactly. We design brand identities for national companies. Actually, we just finished a major campaign for Pure Glow, the same skincare brand your firm represents. His hand froze midair. Wait, Pure Glow. I nodded slowly.
Yeah.
We handle their creative. Their marketing department said they were thrilled to finally have design work that didn't look outdated. I let the word hang, sweet and sharp. Dad's face went pale. You mean your company worked with ours? Not with. I corrected gently. Technically, you worked for us. Silverline owns the design contractor firm pitched for last quarter. The silence that followed was exquisite. Jason's smug confidence dissolved right in front of me, replaced by disbelief. Mom's eyes darted between us like she was watching something impossible unfold. I leaned back, calm, deliberate. I guess the tables really do turn. Jason's voice cracked slightly. You're saying you own that agency? I built it, I said softly. From scratch. With 2 jobs and a lot of sleepless nights. No one spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the restaurant and the quiet clink of a spoon against porcelain. Finally, Mom whispered, Lily, why didn't you ever tell us? I smiled faintly. You never ask. Jason cleared his throat, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Well, good for you, sis. Guess all that hustling paid off. Oh. It did, I replied, standing as the waiter approached with a check. Dinner's on me. Jason started to protest, but the waiter placed the receipt in front of him, and when he glanced down, his jaw tightened. The bill had already been settled. I'd bought the restaurant 3 months ago. For a moment, the table was silent. The air felt thick with something unsaid, pride, shame, disbelief. I watched Jason's expression twist between confusion and wounded ego, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small sitting across from him. Dad cleared his throat. You own this restaurant? I nodded. Silverline bought it earlier this year. It's one of our investments now. I figured it'd be poetic to have dinner here. Jason looked like he was choking on the words he couldn't form. So, all this time you were what? Just pretending to struggle. I tilted my head, my voice calm but firm.
No, Jason.
I was struggling. You just never cared enough to notice when I stopped. Mom fidgeted with her napkin. Honey, we didn't mean to make you feel unseen. I interrupted gently. You didn't have to mean it. You just had to keep doing it. There it was, the quiet truth I'd never spoken aloud. It didn't come out angry, just final. Jason leaned forward. So, what now? You here to rub it in? To show off? I smiled faintly.
No.
I'm here because I think we've all been living in a lie. You were taught that comfort meant success. I was taught that struggle meant failure. Turns out both were wrong. Dad's jaw tightened. You think you're better than us now? No, I said softly. Just freer. The waiter poured another round of wine, but no one touched their glasses. After a long silence, Mom spoke again, her voice smaller this time. Your brother's firm, it's been struggling. He could use someone with your business sense. I met Jason's eyes. So you want my help? He hesitated, pride flickering, but then nodded.
Yeah.
Maybe. I folded my hands on the table. Then here are my conditions. Jason blinked. Conditions?
Yes.
You want me to help? Then first you start from the ground up. No special treatment. No using Dad's name. You'll actually learn what it's like to build something. His mouth opened, but I didn't let him interrupt. Second, I continued, turning to my parents, you stop enabling him. Let him fail. Let him feel what it means to earn. Mom's eyes softened, guilt flickering in her gaze. And third, I said, lowering my tone, you treat me and each other with respect. I'm not your afterthought anymore. Jason looked down, jaw clenched. That's harsh. No, I said gently, that's balance. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Dad exhaled slowly. Maybe it's time we all learn something from you. I smiled, not out of victory but peace. Maybe it is. As the night wound down, I watched them shift just slightly. The arrogance dulled, the superiority cracked. They were finally seeing me, not as the girl who struggled, but as the woman who survived. And for once, I wasn't chasing their approval. Weeks passed after that dinner, and something subtle began to change. Jason started calling, not for help, but for advice. He'd tell me about projects he was handling on his own, small wins that made him sound more grounded than I'd ever heard him before. Once he even admitted, "You were right, Lily. I never knew how easy I had it." That admission meant more than I expected. Mom began sending messages too, not the performative kind filled with updates about Jason, but soft, genuine ones. Made your favorite peach pie today. Thought of you. Dad even stopped by my office once, holding 2 coffees like a peace offering. We talked for an hour about business, about family, about how pride can make people blind. I didn't forgive everything overnight, but for the first time, it felt possible. One quiet evening, I found myself sitting by my apartment window again, the same place where the story began. The city glowed beneath me, restless and alive. On my wrist, Grandma's silver bracelet caught the light from the street below, shimmering like it was winking at me. I touched it gently, smiling. Her words echoed in my mind, soft and steady. "You'll build your own table one day." And I had. But what she didn't tell me, what I had to learn for myself, was that once you've built it, you also get to choose who sits there. My table wasn't made of privilege or pity. It was built from sleepless nights, stubborn faith, and a woman's quiet will to rise. So when Jason called again, this time to say thank you, I didn't feel the old ache of resentment. Just a calm kind of pride. I looked out at the skyline and whispered to myself, it took everything I had to survive, but I did more than that. I built something worth living for. And with that thought, I raised my glass, to the woman I became, to the family finally learning, and to every version of me that refused to give up. Because that dinner didn't just change them. It changed me. Bottom of form.